Have you ever felt like you're a problem that needs solving? Like there's something fundamentally wrong with you that keeps holding you back, keeps making you anxious, unhappy, or stuck? Maybe you've spent hours scrolling through self-help tips, trying new habits, reading books about mindset or productivity, hoping that this time, this new trick or routine will finally fix you. But deep down, it still feels like something's missing. Like the more you try to improve, the more exhausted and disconnected you become from yourself. That feeling isn't accidental. It's the natural consequence of a deeply ingrained belief that the way you are right now is not enough, not good enough, and needs fixing. But what if that belief itself is the real problem? From the moment we start growing up, we get messages, subtle and loud, that who we are isn't quite right. We need to be smarter, faster, more disciplined, happier, more attractive, more productive. The world around us, family, school, media, and culture all push this idea that change equals value. And so we grow up internalizing the myth that to be worthy, we must constantly improve, polish, and fix ourselves. This idea, while motivating on the surface, sets us up for a lifetime of dissatisfaction because it creates an endless gap between who we are and who we should be. And the closer we chase that ideal, the further we feel from ourselves. Psychology teaches us that this relentless self-criticism is not a sign of strength or discipline. It's often a sign of deep insecurity and pain. The inner voice pushing you to do better is frequently rooted in fear. Fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of being abandoned. It's a protective alarm system that, over time, can become so loud and demanding that it drowns out your true self. The key problem here is misunderstanding the nature of change and growth. We tend to think of change as fixing a broken part, but true change rarely comes from fighting against yourself. Instead, it comes from understanding yourself, from meeting the parts of you that have been wounded, scared, or ashamed, and offering them acceptance, not judgment. Carl Jung, one of the pioneers of modern psychology, spoke about the concept of the shadow, the parts of ourselves we reject or deny because they feel unacceptable or painful. He argued that wholeness comes not from eliminating these shadow parts, but from integrating them. Trying to fix or suppress your shadow only pushes it deeper underground, making it more powerful and disruptive. In practical terms, this means that every trait or behavior you've tried to fix, whether it's anxiety, procrastination, anger, or self-doubt, is actually a message from your inner system trying to keep you safe in its own way. Instead of immediately fighting those parts, the invitation is to understand, what is this part afraid of? What is it protecting? What need is it trying to meet? Philosophy supports this approach. The Stoics believe that our suffering is largely created by our judgments about events, not the events themselves. So if you think you're broken and need to be fixed, you create suffering by holding onto that judgment. Buddhist teachings go even further, teaching that suffering arises from attachment to the idea of a fixed self. The self that must be improved, fixed, or perfected is an illusion. When you loosen your grip on that illusion, you open space for peace. Understanding is radically different from fixing. Fixing implies a problem. Understanding implies curiosity and compassion. It's the difference between trying to hammer a crooked nail straight and taking a moment to see why the nail bent in the first place. So why don't you need to fix yourself? Because you're not broken. You're not a problem to solve. You are a whole person who has developed coping mechanisms, survival strategies, and habits that made sense in your life's context. What you really need is to understand your patterns, honor your pain, and create a safe space inside yourself where change can happen naturally, without force, without shame. When you start to understand this, self-acceptance doesn't feel like giving up. It feels like coming home. It feels like the beginning of real transformation because it comes from connection, not conflict. So here's the thing. Why is this idea that you need to fix yourself so popular? Why do we all buy into this never-ending quest for self-improvement that often leaves us feeling worse, not better? The answer lies not just in psychology, but also deep in the culture we live in. Our modern world glorifies productivity, perfection, and constant upgrading. We live in a time where everything is marketed as something to optimize your body, your career, your mindset, even your happiness. Social media bombards us with perfect images, flawless routines, success stories, and quick fixes. It's no wonder that we start to believe that if we're not constantly improving, we're failing. This creates a vicious cycle. The more we try to fix ourselves to fit the ideal, the more we realize how far we are from it. And the more we feel broken, the harder we push to fix what isn't broken to begin with: our essential selves. Psychology tells us that this cycle fuels anxiety and depression because it's based on an impossible standard, a fixed idea of who you should be, rather than a fluid, evolving understanding of who you are. And when that standard is tied to self-worth, every failure to measure up feels like a personal attack. Philosophers have talked about this for centuries. The ancient Stoics taught that it's not external things that disturb us, but our judgments about them. So when you judge yourself harshly for not being enough, you create your own suffering. Buddhism offers a similar insight. Suffering comes from attachment to a fixed idea of self, to expectations, to desires for perfection. But here's the catch. Understanding yourself doesn't mean you stop growing or stop caring about who you want to be. It means you shift your approach. Instead of fighting yourself, you listen. Instead of pushing away your flaws, you invite them in with curiosity. Instead of harsh criticism, you offer kindness. That shift changes everything. It transforms growth from a battle into a journey. You stop trying to fix parts of yourself you dislike and start discovering what they're really about. Maybe your anxiety is a sign that something in your life needs attention, not a defect to erase. Maybe your anger is telling you you've been hurt or ignored. Maybe your procrastination is your brain's way of protecting you from burnout. When you understand these parts, you no longer need to fix them. You need to honor them. You need to hold space for them in yourself. That's how true healing happens. And the wildest part? When you stop fighting who you are and start understanding yourself, that's when you actually start to change. Not because you force yourself to, but because you created the conditions for change to happen naturally. Because you stopped being your own worst enemy and became your own strongest ally. So yes, you don't need to fix yourself. You need to understand yourself. Not to become perfect, but to become whole. So here's where it all comes together. When you stop trying to fix yourself and start trying to understand yourself, something shifts inside. It's not instant, it's not magic, and it's definitely not easy, but it's real. Understanding yourself means paying attention to the stories you tell yourself about who you are and why you behave the way you do. It means noticing the voices in your head, especially the harsh ones, and asking, where did this come from? Is this really true? What is this trying to protect me from? Instead of seeing your anxiety, your self-doubt, or your anger as enemies, you begin to see them as messengers. They're trying to tell you something important about your needs, your history, or your boundaries. When you listen with kindness, these parts stop shouting and start whispering. This doesn't mean you let every part of yourself run wild or excuse harmful behavior. It means you engage in a dialogue with yourself rather than a war. You set boundaries, make choices, and grow, but from a place of respect, not rejection. Philosophers like Carl Jung and modern therapists agree that true healing is about integration, bringing together all parts of yourself, even the ones you're ashamed of or want to hide. When you integrate those parts, you become whole, and wholeness feels like peace. And here's the best part. When you stop fighting yourself, you free up energy. Energy that was wasted on criticism and shame now goes into creativity, connection, and joy. You become more present. You become more authentic. You begin to live in a way that feels aligned with who you really are, not who you think you should be. So if you've been feeling broken, stuck, or like you're always chasing something just out of reach, remember this. You don't need to fix yourself. You need to understand yourself. Because the real work isn't about changing who you are. It's about changing how you relate to who you are. And that change is where freedom lives. It's not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming real. And that is more than enough.